Heal Me by Embrace the Insectric on AO3. Chapter 18. The first thing Izuku had requested once the interrogation had finished was to call Katsuki to let him know that he was safe and back on campus. Of course, Katsuki already knew this, but they needed to maintain the ruse they had created. Izuku played the role of a traumatized victim quite well, so no one questioned how Katsuki returned on campus so quickly, almost as if he'd been waiting for his cue. It only appeared as if a protective and loving boyfriend had dropped everything to rush over to the one he loved. He even had made sure to update Katsuki on the situation, so it wouldn't seem so strange that he was so informed on what happened. As soon as Izuku spotted Katsuki and Shouto walking anxiously on the steps of the 2A dormitory, he broke away from Aizawa, who had been escorting him there, to sprint towards them. A passionate reunion helped to solidify the story even more, but Izuku didn't really have to fake the happy laughter that escaped him when Katsuki swooned him over his arms and swung him around. The two clung onto each other for a few moments longer before Katsuki released him so he could get greetings and hugs Shouto as well. "So, what's the verdict?" Katsuki asked, glancing between the teacher and his boyfriend. 2 week suspension where I'm only allowed to be at home or UA, and I can't socially interact with other students beyond internship-related work," Izuku relayed, with a tired smile and non-conformable shrug. "Does that include—" "Yes, that includes you too, Bakugou," Aizawa answered. Izuku forced down a chuckle at seeing the 5 stages of grief flash through his boyfriend's expression as he realized they'd be separated like children in timeout for the next 2 weeks. Shouta noticed the reaction as well, his mouth twisting in a sympathetic smile. The sympathy was probably less for Katsuki's situation and more for the fact that Katsuki would be even more unpleasant to deal with than usual until the separation was over. Wasn't being kidnapped punishment enough? Shouta tried to argue. Midoriya refused to confess to anyone else involved in the escape from the League of Villains, and he wasn't exactly polite in his refusal, Aizawa explained, narrowing his eyes at Izuku, who only smiled back in response. So unless anyone would like to share their own accounts— Like I said, Izuku interrupted, voice firm. Nothing more to share. Aizawa stared at him for a few moments, the allegation in his eyes saying that he wanted to start another fight. But then the gaze drifted down and settled on a new patch of scarred tissue covering Izuku's forearm, and the look softened. It softened even further when Katsuki reached out and tugged Izuku back into a parallel embrace, desperate for any sort of contact and clearly comforted by any moment he relieved. Right. Aizawa surrendered, his tone exhausted yet accepting. His eyes flickered back over to study Katsuki, who was still sulking from the news that he'd be limited in his interactions with his boyfriend. Cheer up, Bakugou. Once the suspension is over, you'll be spending plenty of time with Midoriya. Katsuki frowned at this and pulled away from Izuku to send him a questioning look. Given the value of my work, there are concerns about my level of protection? I'll be taking the provisional license exam so I can carry defensive support weapons, Izuku explained. But until then, they want a hero to be accompanying me at all times for protection. They want me to be your bodyguard? Katsuki asked, brows raised as he looked in his new information. More like glorified babysitter, Izuku murmured, with a roll of his eyes. When your schedule allows it, Aizawa clarified. Lemillion has already gradually accepted the position, and he could only watch over Midoriya when he's not on patrol. I, as well as other few in the UA faculty members, have also volunteered to fill in any time gaps. Any time remaining after that will be assigned to UA students who hold active provisional license, though we'll prefer to have 2 on shift at the time in those cases. Think you can handle it? Izuku teased as he jabbed a finger into Katsuki's chest. Or will you get sick of seeing me too much? Katsuki's mouth was curled into his usual manic grin, and the sight filled Izuku's chest with a warmth he had been missing for far too long. Katsuki's passion and fire came from drive to fiercity and dutifully protect what belonged to him, and Izuku truly and wholeheartedly belonged to him, just as Katsuki belonged to the healer in return. The world truly was right when Katsuki and Izuku were together. It was balanced. Aizawa let out a breath, barely hiding his own smile beneath the folds of his binding cloth, as he moved to enter the dorms. He didn't bother to look behind, only leaving the door wide open as he called over his shoulders. Come with me and we can work out details with your classmates, he instructed. Through the open door, Izuku could see that much of 2A and some drifters from 2B were already assembled in the common areas, their heads all swiveled to look towards Aizawa as he entered the expectantly peek around his form, to get a glimpse at the safe and sound Izuku. Katsuki gave Izuku form a quick squeeze before letting go to trail after his teacher, eager to finalize the position that had been offered to him. Izuku hung back just outside and let his own breath as he mentally prepared himself for the onslaught of comments and questions he'd surely relieve as soon as he entered. Not the worst outcome, Shouta acknowledged, waiting patiently by his side. Izuku nodded in agreement and took a moment to observe his friend, taking stock of the dark circles under his eyes that were beginning to rival Shinzo's and the tense way he was holding himself. He had seemed off their entire exchange with Dabi, like he was being assaulted by waves of deja vu with no recipient or reason. Izuku felt immense guilt not sharing what he knew about Dabi with him, but at the same time, he knew he had made the right choice in saying nothing. Giving Shouto an explanation for the confusing and confliction in his head would ease that specific pain temporarily, but would only cause more novel versions of pain and conflict down the road. Maybe one day he'll find out, but it wasn't going to be today, and it wouldn't be from Izuku. Hey, Sho, can you promise me something? Izuku called out. Sho made a small noise to indicate he was listening. This may sound weird or obvious, but always take a moment to remember why you wanted to be a hero. Shoto's face scrunched up in another expression of confusion before realization flooded his features, swiftly accompanied by apprehension. Does this have anything to do with what I said to Dabi? Shota asked, shaking his head. Because you don't need to worry about me. I already told you that your intentions were good. Izuku quickly reassured him, reaching out to place a comforting hand on his shoulders. Just promise me you won't lose that instinct. The world isn't black and white, as we're taught to believe, and there's too many heroes in this industry for the wrong reasons. It was clear Shouto still had lingering questions, but seemed fairly pacified for the time being with those words. The idea that not all heroes had the same motivations or principles for their work was certainly one he was familiar with, considering who his father was. He was Brad, and raised to be a tool, a trump card, and he refused to be such. Promise me something in return, then, Shouta replied, gazing briefly, flickering down to look at the new scar on Izuku's arm. Look after yourself. Sho, I know it's hard with your quirk, but you're no good to anyone if you're dead. Be a little selfish sometimes. Shouta looked through the open door of the dorms, eyes resting on Katsuki. Do it for Bakugou at least. Izuku followed his gaze and watched his boyfriend from afar. He had his phone out and was showing it to Aizawa, likely to cross-reference his schedule and see where he could fit Izuku's roastling security details. Kirishima had an arm wrapped around Katsuki's shoulders, hanging off him with his own phone out to see where he could help. Images flashed through his mind of Katsuki's more vulnerable moments, the ones he had shared with Izuku over the years. One of his panic attacks and screaming matches and angry tears and quiet pleas. He thought of the desperate panic he had seen in Katsuki's expression years ago over the video call he had managed to make after being rendered unconscious and nearly dead for days because his own self-sacrificing decision. Izuku thought of the pure and shameless joy that had shone on Katsuki's face when he had surprised him weeks prior on the PE grounds before his boyfriend had tackled him to the ground to roll over like they were children again. I promise, Izuku murmured. Shouto sent him a grateful smile before the two of them finally entered the dorms, shutting the door behind them. Before his classmates had a chance to swarm Izuku, Shouto moved swiftly ahead and contracted them back, firm orders to give the healer some space and privacy for a few moments. The only one he allowed to slip by was Shinso, who wandered over to Izuku with a slight, limping gaze. So, I heard the news, Shinso said when he reached him. Suspension and bodyguards? Why so glum? Izuku questioned as he took in Shinso's sullen expression. I know we both got in trouble, but at least you won't have a bunch of heroes watching your every move. Shinso looked at Izuku like he had grown a second head. Izuku knew why he had earned that incredibly stare, but he refused to comment on it, and any support of that thought, he knew, were no doubts circling in Shinso's mind. I couldn't protect you, Shinso argued, face twisting into something darker as he shook his head. I wasn't enough. That's not fair, Izuku softly slapped. Kachen had 2 classes of students and a handful of pro heroes with him at the training camp, and they still took him. I invited you to that concert. If it weren't for me, I would have still been kidnapped, Izuku reasoned. Another day, another time, but they would have gotten me. That isn't what matters. He reached out and placed a hand on Shinso's cheek, watching as the lingering scrapes and bruises faded away from his pale skin. You helped get me back, Shinso. A myriad of emotions flickered through Shinso's eyes, shame and guilt, mingling with relief and pride in a puzzling display of inner conflict. Izuku knew it would be a while before Shinso moved on from this experience, and it was quite possible he'd never get over it fully, always seeing it as a moment of failure. Izuku could only hope that he would be able to help the hero in training come to terms with things and accept that he had truly done all he could. There were just some fights that even heroes couldn't win. Oi, don't think that just because you're injured that you could skip out on training. Shinso's head warped around to look at Katsuki as the other boy approached the pair. Izuku smiled as he caught the thin-veiled, possessive anger that flashed in Katsuki's eyes, seeing Izuku's hands pressed against Shinso's cheek. He dropped the hand and held out his other one for Katsuki to take, which his boyfriend eagerly did. You still want to train with me? Shinso questioned, finally comprehending Katsuki's words. What have I told you? Katsuki said with a smirk, as he pulled Izuku closer. As long as you give it your all, then I'll work with you. So far, I haven't seen any evidence of the contrary. Shinso's eyes widened before a surprised chuckle escaped his lips, and the beginning of a smile made his nose scrunch up. He said nothing, and simply nodded his head towards Katsuki before being called away by Kaminari, who was encouraging him to submit his schedule like the rest of the class was doing to see if they could cover any shifts. I was fucking terrified they were going to send you back to that stupid island, Katsuki confessed, once they were finally alone as he wrapped both his arms around Izuku. You and me both, Izuku murmured, as he buried his face into Katsuki's chest and wrapped his own arms around the other's waist. He felt his boyfriend kiss the top of his head, face burying in the green curls atop his head. His hair probably reeked of blood and sweat, but Katsuki didn't seem to mind at that point. At least I've got you until graduation, right? About that. Izuku pulled away slightly, to properly face his boyfriend. Katsuki's expression was laced with concern now, and Izuku quickly moved to change that. When we called Lemillion to ask about guarding me, he brought up an interesting proposition. Oh, yeah? Katsuki instinctively prompted. He offered me a position with Sir Nightaye's agency after I graduate, Izuku told him, grinning as he was finally able to share the extra bit of news he had been hanging on to. The offer had apparently been something in the works for a while now. Izuku had been introduced as a researcher for Toogata, but he would still have been able to fulfill that role from his place on Island. However, during their phone calls, Toogata had expressed his hope that Izuku could stay in Japan after graduation, not only for his benefit, but for Eri's as well. Ever since he had seen her, the healer interaction, he had decided that Izuku needed to stick around. Working together from afar was all well and good, but there were certain things that just worked better in person. What about your sponsors? Katsuki eyes, with wide eyes. You're under contract with a few of them. I know you need to work on Island after graduation. Sir Nighteye said he could handle that, Izuku explained. Island would be getting a very good publicity if one of their students was working closely with the hero who was media keep hauling as the future symbol of peace. Even without his quirk, he says that he sees things working out in our favor. What about good publicity from dating the future #1 hero? Katsuki challenged. Cocky, Izuku playfully chided. You haven't even graduated yet. Katsuki grinned and let out a laugh, the same flary energy in his demeanor that sparked before fights and competitions. His expression softened as the news seemed to finally register, and he stared at Izuku with hope in his eyes. So, you're staying? I'm staying, Izuku confirmed, with amazing chuckles. He's still slightly shocked by the news himself. I'm sure Mom will move back too. She's really missing living close to Auntie Mitsu, and she was never all that fond of being surrounded by scientists. My parents will be fucking ecstatic, Katsuki noted. The wedding comments will probably get worse though. Well, they're gonna have to learn how to wait. I know, right? Katsuki agreed, pressing his lips to Izuku's temple in a quick kiss. We're only in high school. Sure, there's that, Izuku agreed, as the corners of his mouth began to pull into a sheepish grin, unseen by Katsuki with their current angles. But also, I don't know if I should settle, you know? What do you mean? Katsuki questioned, pulling away slightly to send Izuku a look of confirm. Well, if I'm going to marry someone, Izuku reasoned, quickly schooling his features into a mask of nonchalance, it should be the actual confirmed #1 hero. Don't you agree? Izuku felt Katsuki's arm tense around him as the other boy's brows furrowed. Izuku, which would mean you need to earn that title first, before we could even begin to think about a wedding. Izuku mused as he took a step away from Katsuki, who remained frozen where he stood. Baby, please think about this for a second. Unless you, of course, you think you won't become the #1 hero, Izuku said, his words and expression laced with the mock concern and disappointment. Katsuki's eyes twitched. No, he snarled. Izuku raised a brow, and his boyfriend soldered at the sight, a warning that he was close to crossing a line with his tone. Katsuki took a breath. No, I never said that. Of course I'll be the #1 hero. I just don't know how long that will take. Shame, Izuku murmured. He shrugged and began to walk away towards Katsuki's classmates. Maybe Shouto would be quicker about it? Wait, what? Hey, Shouto! Don't you dare fucking respond, Icy Hot. Oh my god, I forget how cute the ending is. The ending is so cute. I love this fanfic. I read it a couple months ago, actually. And I decided that I wanted to podfic it because it was just such a cute fanfic. it was a little bit slice of life at the beginning, but then the plot hits with the whole kidnapping and everything. My only concern is I wish there was more. Like, I wish the author had more. I wish I could read, like, them as pro heroes, right? I want a slice of life fanfic of just toothache fluff of Izuku Midoriya as a healer and Katsuki Bakugou climbing the ranks and maybe even becoming the #1 hero and a marriage. I want to see a wedding. I want to see a wedding. I need my BKDK wedding. I'm sorry. Anyways, I am excited for the new series. I hope you guys are too. This is the first series I finished. Oh my god, we gotta clap because that is something. Oh my god, voice crack. Oh my god, I'm happy. Wow, it's only been like what 3-4 months since I started this, and oh my god, not this series, but just YouTube in general. Reminiscent. As always, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Join our community server, link is in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.